First Love by Judith Ortiz Cofer. At 14, and for a few years after, my concerns were focused mainly on the alarms going off in my body, warning me of pain or pleasure ahead. I fell in love, or my hormones awakened from their long slumber in my body, and suddenly the goal of my days was focused on one thing: to catch a glimpse of my secret love. And it had to remain a secret, because I had, of course, in the great tradition of tragic romance, chosen to love a boy who was totally out of my reach. He was not Puerto Rican. He was Italian and rich. He was also an older man. He was a senior at the high school when I came in as a freshman. I first saw him in the hall, leaning casually on a wall that was the borderline between girl side and boy side for underclassmen. He looked extraordinarily like a young Marlon Brando, down to the ironic little smile. The total of what I knew about the boy who starred in every one of my awkward fantasies was this: he was the nephew of the man who owned the supermarket on my block. He often had parties at his parents' beautiful home in the suburbs, which I would hear about. This family had money, which came to our school in many ways, and this last fact made my knees weak. He worked at the store near my apartment building on weekends and in the summer. My mother could not understand why I became so eager to be the one sent out on her endless errands. I pounced on every opportunity from Friday to late Saturday afternoon to go out after eggs, cigarettes, milk. I tried to drink as much of it as possible, although I hated the stuff, the staple items that she would order from the American store. Week after week I wandered up and down the aisles, taking furtive glances at the stockroom in the back, breathlessly hoping to see my prince. Not that I had a plan. I felt like a pilgrim waiting for a glimpse of Mecca. I did not expect him to notice me. It was my sweet agony. One day I did see him, dressed in a white outfit like a surgeon, white pants and shirt, white cap, and, gross sight, but not to my glazed eyes, blood-smeared butcher's apron. He was helping to drag a side of beef into the freezer storage area of the store. I must have stood there like an idiot, because I remember that he did see me. He even spoke to me. I could have died. I think he said, "Excuse me," and smiled vaguely in my direction. After that, I willed occasions to go to the supermarket. I watched my mother's pack of cigarettes empty ever so slowly. I wanted her to smoke them fast. I drank milk and forced it on my brother, although a second glass of milk for him had to be bought with my share of the Fig Newton cookies, which we both liked, but we were restricted to 1 row each. I gave my cookies up for love, and watched my mother smoke her L&Ms with so little enthusiasm that I thought, God, no! That she might be cutting down on her smoking, or maybe even giving up the habit. At this crucial time? I thought I had to keep my lonely romance a secret. Often I cried hot tears on my pillow for the things that kept us apart. In my mind there was no doubt that he would never notice me, and that is why I felt free to stare at him. I was invisible. He could not see me because I was a skinny Puerto Rican girl, a freshman who did not belong to any group he associated with. At the end of the year, I found out that I had not been invisible. I learned one little lesson about human nature. Adulation leaves a scent, one that we are all equipped to recognize, and no matter how insignificant the source, we seek it. Each June, the nuns at our school would always arrange for some cultural extravaganza. In my freshman year, it was a Roman banquet. We had been studying Greek drama, as a prelude to church history. It was at a fast clip that we galloped through Sophocles and Euripides toward the early Christian martyrs. And our young, energetic sister Agnes was in the mood for spectacle. She ordered the entire student body, a small group of under 300 students, to have our mothers make us togas out of sheets. She handed out a pattern on Mimeo pages fresh out of the machine. I remember the intense smell of the alcohol on the sheets of paper, and how almost everyone in the auditorium brought theirs to their noses and inhaled deeply. Mimeographed handouts were the school day buzz that the new Xerox generation of kids is missing out on. Then, as the last couple of weeks of school dragged on, the city of Patterson becoming a concrete oven, and us wilting in our uncomfortable uniforms, we labored like frantic Roman slaves to build a splendid banquet hall in our small auditorium. Sister Agnes wanted a raised day where the hostess and hostess would be regally enthroned. She had already chosen our senator and lady from among our ranks. The lady was to be a beautiful new student named Sophia, a recent Polish immigrant whose English was still practically unintelligible, but whose features, classically perfect without a trace of makeup, enthralled us. Everyone talked about her gold hair cascading past her waist, and her voice, which could carry a note right up to heaven in choir. The nuns wanted her for God. They kept saying that she had a vocation. We just looked at her in awe, and the boys seemed afraid of her. She just smiled and did as she was told. I don't know that she thought of it at all. The main privilege of beauty is that others will do almost everything for you, including thinking. Her partner was to be our best basketball player, a tall, red-haired senior whose family sent its many offspring to our school. Together, Sophia and her senator looked like the best combination of immigrant genes our community could produce. It did not occur to me to ask then whether anything but their physical beauty qualified them for the starring roles in our production. I had the highest average in the church history class, but I was given the part of one of many Roman citizens. I was to sit in front of the plastic fruit and recite a greeting in Latin along with the rest of the school when our hosts came into the hall and took their places on their throne. On the night of our banquet, my father escorted me in my toga to the front door of our school. I felt foolish in an awkwardly draped sheet, blouse and skirt required underneath. My mother had no great skill as a seamstress. The best she could do was hem a skirt or a pair of pants. That night, I would have traded her for a peasant woman with a golden needle. I saw other Roman ladies emerging from their parents' cars looking authentic in sheets of material that folded over their bodies like the garments on a statue by Michelangelo. How did they do it? How was it that I always got it just slightly wrong? And worse, I believe that other people were just too polite to mention it. The poor little Puerto Rican girl, I could hear them thinking. But in reality, I must have been my worst critic, self-conscious as I was. Soon we were all sitting at our circle of tables, joined together around the die. Sophia glittered like a golden statue. Her smile was beatific. A perfect, silent Roman lady. Her senator looked uncomfortable, glancing around at his buddies, perhaps waiting for the ridicule that he would surely get in the locker room later. The nuns in their black habits stood in the background watching us. What were they supposed to be? The Fates? Nubian slaves? The dancing girls did their modest little dance to teeny music from their finger cymbals, and the speeches were made. Then the grapevine wine was raised in a toast to the Roman Empire we all knew would fall within the week, before finals anyway. All during the program, I had been in a state of controlled hysteria. My secret love sat across the room from me, looking supremely bored. I watched his every move, taking him in gluttonously. I relished the shadow of his eyelashes on his ruddy cheeks, his pouty lips smirking sarcastically at the ridiculous sight of our little play. Once he slumped down on his chair, and our sergeant-at-arms nun came over and tapped him sharply on the shoulder. He drew himself up slowly, with disdain. I loved his rebellious spirit. I believed myself still invisible to him in nothing status as I looked upon my beloved. But toward the end of the evening, as we stood chanting our farewells in Latin, he looked straight across the room and into my eyes. How did I survive the killing power of those dark pupils? I trembled in a new way. I was not cold. I was burning. Yet I shook from the inside, feeling lightheaded, dizzy. The room began to empty, and I headed for the girls' lavatory. I wanted to relish the miracle in silence. I did not think for a minute that anything more would follow. I was satisfied with the enormous favor of a look from my beloved. I took my time, knowing that my father would be waiting outside for me, impatient, perhaps glowing in the dark in his phosphorescent white navy uniform. The others would ride home. I would walk home with my father, both of us in costume. I wanted as few witnesses as possible. When I could no longer hear the crowds in the hallway, I emerged from the bathroom, still under the spell of those mesmerizing eyes. The lights had been turned off in the hallway, and all I could see was the lighted stairwell, at the bottom of which a nun would be stationed. My father would be waiting just outside. I nearly screamed when I felt someone grab me by the waist. But my mouth was quickly covered by someone else's mouth. I was being kissed. My first kiss, and I could not even tell who it was. I pulled away to see that face not 2 inches away from mine. It was he. He smiled down at me. Did I have a silly expression on my face? My glasses felt crooked on my nose. I was unable to move or to speak. More gently, he lifted my chin and touched his lips to mine. This time, I did not forget to enjoy it. Then, like the phantom lover he was, he walked away into the darkened corridor and disappeared. I don't know how long I stood there. My body was changing right there in the hallway of a Catholic school. My cells were tuning up like musicians in an orchestra, and my heart was a chorus. It was an opera I was composing, and I wanted to stand very still and just listen. But of course, I heard my father's voice talking to the nun. I was in trouble if he had to ask about me. I hurried down the stairs, making up a story on the way about feeling sick. That would explain my flushed face, and it would buy me a little privacy when I got home. The next day, Father announced at the breakfast table that he was leaving on a 6-month tour of Europe with the Navy in a few weeks, and that at the end of the school year, my mother, my brother, and I would be sent to Puerto Rico to stay for half a year at Mama's, my maternal grandmother's, house. I was devastated. This was the usual routine for us. We had always gone to Mama's to stay when Father was away for long periods, but this year it was different for me. I was in love, and my heart knocked against my bony chest at this thought. He loved me too? I broke into sobs and left the table. In the next week, I discovered the inexorable truth about my parents. They can't actually carry on with their lives right through the tears, threats, and the awful spectacle of a teenager's broken heart. My father left me to my mother, who impassively packed while I explained over and over that I was at a crucial time in my studies, and that if I left, my entire life would be ruined. All she would say is, "You're an intelligent girl, you'll catch up." Her head was filled with visions of casa and family reunions, long gossip sessions with her mama and sisters. What did she care that I was losing my chance at true love? In the meantime, I tried desperately to see him. I thought he would look for me too, but the few times I saw him in the hallway, he was always rushing away. It would be long weeks of confusion and pain before I realized that the kiss was nothing but a little trophy for his ego. He had no interest in me other than his adorer. He was flattered by my silent worship of him, and he had bestowed a kiss on me to please himself, and to fan the flames. I learned a lesson about the battle of the sexes, then, that I have never forgotten. The object is not always to win, but most times simply to keep your opponent, synonymous at times with the loved one, guessing. But this is too cynical a view to sustain in the face of that overwhelming rush of emotion that is first love. And in thinking back on my own experience with it, I can be objective only to the point where I recall how sweet the anguish was, how caught up in the moment I felt, and how every nerve in my body was involved in this salute to life. Later, much later, after what seemed like an eternity of dragging the weight of unrequited love around with me, I learned to make myself visible and to relish the little battles required to win the greatest prize of all. And much later, I read and understood Albert Camus's statement about the subject that concerns both adolescent and philosopher alike. If love were easy, life would be too simple.